Hello, I'm Don Mooers, and welcome to Montgomery Week in Review. A bill has been introduced in Annapolis in General Assembly to make marijuana a legal drug in Maryland, similar to what Colorado has as its law. Brian Karem, the executive editor of the Sentinel, Air Toker over here, has this story.
Oh dear.
Heroin has become a terrible problem in Montgomery County. States Attorney John McCarthy is here to explain this threat to our residents. The committee from Montgomery went to Annapolis in February. I'm not sure why, and just in February, it goes down there all the time to advocate on behalf of Montgomery County's needs and the state of Maryland's needs before the state legislature. With us today is Stewart Edelstein, the chair this year of the committee from Montgomery. The rising sea level is threatening Maryland, threatening all of America, but especially Maryland and the Chesapeake Bay. We have Linna Barnes, the president of the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County. She's here to tell us all about the upcoming program that's going to be talking about this threat to our great state. Brian Karem, welcome back. It's great to have you here.
Great to be back. How you doing?
The Sentinel continues to be on the cutting edge of stories in Maryland. And Montgomery County, I want to congratulate you.
Thanks.
It's sort of a no holds back attitude that you all have, and it's great to read it every time it comes out. Marijuana, big issue.
Yes, Jamie Raskin has made it a bigger issue. It's kind of surprising actually, because at the beginning of the legislative session, the legislative leaders met with members of the media, and we sat down for the traditional legislative breakfast. And one of the questions was, with the problems that we're facing with the budget,
right,
were we going to see marijuana legalized like in Colorado and Washington? And Senator Mike Miller said, we won't even see that on the. We're having too much trouble dealing with the current legislation and making sure everything's all right with that, decriminalizing it and growing for medical use. That we wouldn't even be able to take a look at this. And then lo and behold, at the end of last week, Jamie Raskin introduces this bill and says, well, we have to deal with it, legalize it.
So one of the things in Colorado was Colorado did have a process, a path, starting off with medical marijuana. And my sister lives in Denver. I mean, it seemed like there are medical dispensaries, 3 or 4 per block. And a number of places. I mean,
medical
literally,
conditions that allowed you to buy it. That
right.
I have hangnail.
And then coming on, and all these edible issues and these other things, for kids and everything else, it's a real issue for parents. It's a real issue for the community. Though Colorado sticks with it. Before you answer that, I know there's a website people can learn more about this and so many other issues.
Our website is www.thesentinel.com, and we have all the stories that we run on it there. And Jamie tries to address some of that. That is addressed in this legislation. It would be dealt with like alcohol. I think the state of Maryland has tried to learn something from Colorado's and Washington's usage of marijuana, and have crafted a bit of legislation that treats it like alcohol, licensing growers 21 years of age or older, and at the same time, as he says, take the money out of the dealers and take the violence out of it.
Okay.
And put the money in the state coffers where it belongs.
And it seems to me, it really, when you think about it, often with bills, it takes a couple of years, 2-3 years for them to get through. So it seems to me he's putting a marker down saying, let's really talk about this and start the discussion.
The
going.
first session of the 4-year cycle.
But remember, that also took place last year in the governor's race. I mean, there was a candidate for governor who already, and lest we forget, this has already been before the state legislature.
Where is the support coming from besides Jamie?
Well, Baltimore, Montgomery County. You will find the more rural counties and representatives are not. I don't predict that this will pass, but I think it will be interesting to see how much strength it has gained this year from last, and I would anticipate within the next 2 or 3 years it will pass.
See, I thought that, having been down there through the debate last year, I think the fact that we have the election of a Republican governor is going to slow this process down. I actually think, if you had asked me last year, I thought we were 2 years away from full-blown legalization in Maryland. I do think that there's a huge sentiment to sit back, watch, and see what's happening in Colorado, watch what's happening in Washington State, and learn.
What about D.C.?
Well,
Well, DC seems to be on hold because the federal government's
federal
put them on
government,
hold.
right.
But and I think the different things is you mentioned edibles. I mean, there was a Maureen Dowd wrote an editorial in the New York Times about edibles that she got out in Colorado, and they are so substantially more powerful than we are learning that to regulate this appropriately to protect the community. There's a lot to this that
There
people
is a
did
lot
not
to
think
regulate.
of
But
before.
speaking to your point, John, about Hogan, part of this is kind of thumbing their nose at Hogan. Hogan came in, and I have to tell you, sitting in that legislative breakfast, we were expecting a conciliatory, let's all work together attitude, and that wasn't what we got. It was, we have pigeonholed the left-wing nuts, and we're going after our agenda. And first question, well, what about the right-wing nuts? Have you pigeonholed them too? Are you working down the middle? No. And so when he came out with his State of the State address, part of this that we're seeing is a bit of blowback because of Hogan's, for lack of a better term, arrogance, and that has caused some. And so I still think 2 or 3 years.
Brian, let me-
I could be wrong.
Let me ask you this. Is
Yes,
this,
I did. It was in the 70s, a long
No,
time
no,
ago.
no. Is this, I mean, you asked a question before about the budget. Is this
nail.
an important enough issue to put other issues off to the side?
I don't think I think when people look at the hard numbers from Colorado and Washington, it's going to be too overwhelmingly seductive to say no to. And
We didn't say no to gambling.
I
We
was-
didn't say
that's
no to
what I was
marijuana.
gonna say.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, that's
it's money.
I'm very cynical about this. Look, and like, there was a candidate who was in favor of universal pre-K kindergarten, and how are we going to pay for it?
Right.
marijuana.
Legalize
They
marijuana.
won't
and take-
go in steps. Excuse me. They won't go in steps and do it for medical purposes first.
Well, we've
and
kind
then-
of gone in steps.
Got about
We've
20 seconds
we've
left in a second.
decriminalized it. There is the medical part of it. There is the growing part of it. So now it's almost a logical step. This is the next logical step. And like John said, you know, everyone thought it would be 2 or 3 years. And with Hogan, now we thought it might be longer. But I'm telling you, I still think that's still about the right
Okay.
amount of time.
Well, Brian, we look forward to
Now I'm the gateway drug.
we
and
talk,
we'll
well,
go
we talk
into-
about this. And,
I
and
don't
later
think we
we'll
are
have
the
to come
gateway
back.
drug. Yes,
You're right.
I don't think it
correct.
is the
You are.
gateway.
All
You
right,
are
so,
correct.
I mean, this reminds me of my high school health class because a lot of it was the gateway. We go from marijuana and we go to heroin. John McCarthy, it's great to have you here, States
Dan, it's
Attorney.
great to be with you.
Thanks. So we're heroin. I mean, when you know people, a lot of us have seen you on other TV programs, and you've been out talking about this, and your colleagues from other places in the state have been talking about this. This comes as a huge surprise.
Well, I think there's a lot of people that are very naive about this subject. I think a lot of people think, for instance, Montgomery County is immune from heroin deaths. Well, 2 years ago we had 24. We're going to creep up close to 50 this year. Across the state of Maryland, it's about 133% increase in heroin overdose deaths. We may come very, very close between fentanyl and heroin to there being 700 deaths. We are losing people at a greater rate for heroin than we are from homicide.
All right, you've got the problem is this heroin overdose and this heroin use. How in the world did this come about? We don't have skid rows.
The unintended consequences of a piece of legislation passed about 3 years ago. We knew that there was the abuse of prescription drugs, opiates and things like that.
well publicized.
Well publicized, and the legislature responsibly tried to tighten that up so that we have a universal prescription computer system where we can find out where John McCarthy has filled that same prescription 3 times. The pharmacist cut you down. What's happened is that drug, which is the gateway drug.
Yes.
The gateway drugs are, in many instances, in the cases that I see, the pharmaceutical drugs like OxyContin and things like that.
The opiates.
Those are, they're now 4 to 8 times more expensive, $40 to $80 a pill. Heroin is dirt cheap. It's
You're talking
dirt
about
cheap.
the street price.
Street price. That's exactly right. Thank you. The
yeah.
street price of these prescription drugs, which is what these kids are addicted to, have gotten so expensive. They're going to the cheap alternative, which is heroin, which is $10.
So is it kids or is it all ages?
If you look at the state statistics on this, between 18 and 30 is where we lose the most people. Between 18 and 30, there seems to be a decline in the death rate in the 30s, but it then spikes again in the 40s. And some of the medical people tell me it's simply because the long-term chronic heroin abusers, their bodies just begin to give out in their 40s, and they can't sustain themselves taking the drug.
And there's really not adequate health care for the mental health problem that you all are trying to broach. Is that's a big part of that puzzle.
Well, there are always overlaps. Many of these things, people have mental health challenges who also become involved with alcohol and/or drugs. Those layers just make the issue's so complex.
This reminds me, I mean, this is a balloon, and we pushed in a bubble, and out pops maybe
Another
an even worse bubble.
Sure.
Solutions, what are you finding, right? In fact, there's a website first. I think we're seeing that website on the screen right now.
There's a
to the
website
States
from
Attorney
the
Office.
States Attorney's Office. Oh, there are a couple of legislative efforts. Kathleen DeMay's been a great leader on this, and I've been working with Kathleen, and we've drafted a bill. We are trying to pass in Maryland a law that says if you distribute heroin or fentanyl and it results in death, you're going to be held responsible for the death that you cause. There's and the federal government has that, so we want to make sure that people are held responsible. It's a 30-year penalty if you cause somebody's death. The federal government has this. But what's also important about this is this bill has a Good Samaritan provision in it. If I am with Stu, and Stu begins to overdose on heroin, I want to make sure that every heroin user in Maryland knows,
Right.
pick up the phone, call 911,
Take
save
him-
this man's
Take
life.
him to the hospital.
Take
do
him to the
whatever
hospital.
Don't
We-
worry about
you
the
want.
criminal.
Don't worry about it, because we are interested in saving lives. So I mean, when
Great.
Kathleen and I
Great.
sat down and we drafted this bill, we drafted it with that. And we also made sure we did not target mere users.
All right, well,
We've
let me-
excluded them.
All right. We're pushing in a bubble, but won't another bubble come out? I mean, how do we solve this? These are people in pain, a lot of them.
You
This
know,
is a cheaper alternative. How do we, is it the medical marijuana? I don't want to put you on the spot, but what's
well,
the...
I don't know that. Look, I think drug treatment. Unfortunately, the dollars. Look, we know that we have a budget
There's the
shortfall on the
answer.
statewide. The number of beds that are available for treatment in Maryland continues to shrink. The number one way you don't lock. Look, everybody knows you don't lock your way up out of a drug problem. Treatment. Is the number one way to deal with this particular issue.
And what about
and
education? What about education? I was going to ask you about that.
Education is huge, man. Every time we go out and cover an issue like that, it amazes me the number of people who have no clue
Right.
as to the fact. And treating these people as criminals to me is anathema. I love what he's doing because that's the right way to go.
And see, people naively think about heroin and think inner city kind of drug.
Right.
That is absolutely not the case. It is absolutely not the case. There's not a section or a geographic region in Maryland that's not affected by what's
I
happening.
think that's the difference. I mean, I think you think of it. Many people think of it. It's a street corners in Baltimore. It's not here in Montgomery
Row.
County. It's Skid Row, but that's not what it is anymore.
Our
Middle
last
class
death,
America.
our last death was in a country club community in $1 million house overlooking a grain.
We've got 10 seconds. Final word on this? We're going to solve this.
Look, call your legislators, call your senators. We think that we've got a good bill here that's going to give us, an additional tool to confront this. We need to get this bill passed.
States Attorney John McCarthy, I hope this is not the last time you're going to come on.
You call and I'm here.
We'll be right back after these messages. And we're back. Stewart Edelstein, welcome.
Thank you.
It is great to have you here.
Great to be here. Thank you so much.
So what are we doing here? We got Committee for Montgomery continuing its unbelievable work on behalf of all of us. So maybe we could start with, before we go into some of the things that you've been advocating this year in this assembly, talk a little bit about what the Committee for Montgomery is and what it does.
Committee for Montgomery is a coalition of leaders from Maryland civic organizations, unions, education institutions, businesses, and community service groups. And they come together as a group to advocate on behalf of Montgomery County in the General Assembly in Annapolis on issues that are important to the future of the county.
So, for instance, this year you've got 2 issues that you've reached consensus on that you've already gone down and started advocating, talking to the Assembly about that are important to Montgomery County, not just to Montgomery County, but I think the whole state. Right?
Absolutely. So for our members, we have 40 members on our board, and for us to take a position on any legislation or any issue, we have to have 85% agreement amongst the members.
Now that 85% rule is on your website along with everything else that people can learn about Committee for Montgomery. So what's that website?
www.committeeformontgomery.org.
And what are the 2 issues that you
The
all
2
agreed
issues
on?
we settled on was voter participation. We're very concerned about primary voter participation, about redistricting in the state. We know that there's been a bit of decline in voter involvement in elections and primaries. And so we've asked for a commission to be formed by the General Assembly.
To redraw the district.
Well, partly that. I mean, the governor is interested in that. We're interested in primary reform, interested in financing elections. We're interested in open primaries so you don't have
Well,
to have
what's
a
the
party.
aspect of redistricting then? If it,
Redistricting would be through congressional.
And this is
that-
because we have the
Who's
most gerrymandered,
Yeah,
voted the most
gerrymandering.
gerrymandered district.
Maryland is one of the worst.
I agree. I know that.
That's for sure. But
Yeah.
you got, like, for example, in the Rockville elections last time, 16%
Yes.
turnout.
Right.
How do you get more people? I mean, that's the magic.
But that's partly a municipal election where it's not in the November
this was,
election.
I'm talking about during the November election. During
Yeah.
the
Oh, in
November
Rock-
election
and
in Rockville,
16%.
voter
And in
turnout.
primaries it was even lower.
Yes, 11.
So we advocated for a commission, and Jamie Raskin has agreed to
guy.
sponsor that along with Sheila Hickson.
Okay.
So that's going to be in the General Assembly. We have very good support. We've gone across jurisdictions. We've
Sure.
worked with other delegations, other organizations to support this piece of
Okay,
legislation.
so we have, that's the first one. And the second one has to do with the
With
costs?
education,
What's,
yeah.
what's all that about?
So the geographic cost of education index is dollars that go to jurisdictions that have high expenses in education. It's a discretionary amount of dollars, and there's legislation introduced by Nancy King to make that
State
a
senator
mandatory.
from
Senator
District
from
39.
Montgomery County to make that a mandatory state obligation.
Well, that's because the governor's talking about cutting that amount of money, isn't he? Or not giving as much as the
Yeah.
formula calls for.
Last couple of years, it's been fully funded, and Montgomery County has gotten about $35 million from the state to support its education system. And this year, the governor has recommended capping that.
You want that to be a mandatory part of the budget, so that's another part of the budget that can't be adjusted by the legislature.
That's correct. That's correct. To make
Which
that
means there's only about 11% of the budget left that it can be adjusted.
Right. It's going to be an uphill battle, I think, but I think there's a commitment in the General Assembly to make sure that there's more fully funded
And how is
education.
this linked to the MOE, right?
What's that? I'm sorry, what's the MOE?
Maintenance of effort.
Yeah.
It's separate. It's separate from
it's
that.
Not included in MOE.
The maintenance
Would-
of
would-
effort
would-
is
would
what
get
they
the
have
same
to
legal
give every year
protection.
to.
Would have the same legal protection as the MLA?
Yes, exactly.
So let me ask you this. I was talking with somebody from Western Maryland just about a week ago, and this issue came up. What do you say to these folks in Western Maryland, Montgomery County? Why are we giving more money to the richest county when the needs are elsewhere in the state?
Well, you know, Montgomery County has this. People think about Montgomery County as a wealthy county, and it has wealth. But Montgomery County is changing. It's changing dramatically. It's becoming browner. It's becoming poorer. It's becoming older. Its needs are changing dramatically. If you look at the school system, I mean, the school system is about 34% Caucasian, and 35% of the students in Montgomery County Public Schools are on free and reduced lunch. That's an indication
We
of poverty.
feed
50,000 students.
We feed 54,000 kids breakfast and lunch every day.
Which is larger than most of
54,000.
the
It's
school
larger than the
population.
DC
Larger
school
than the
system.
school system in the District of Columbia.
So
Here's the
our
question, though. How do you?
We have 20 seconds, real quick.
The big question: how do you make sure that they're being responsible in the money that we give them, that they spend it correctly?
Stu, you've got
That's
10.
the big question.
Stu, you got 10 seconds to answer that.
I think I don't know how to answer that question except to say there are real needs, but the outcomes of the school system are actually doing pretty well. I mean, we have problems, but the school system is responding.
That's the final word for you here. We could go on and on with each of these segments, but we don't have time.
I didn't even get my issues out.
You got your issues
You have
out
to come
really well.
back.
We got both of them.
Okay.
But all of your issues pale in comparison to our next and our final topic, which is the rising sea level.
Yes, well, I have the
global warming.
style section story. So this is, but
Yeah,
it's
this
not.
is not a
it's,
style section.
it's news too.
Linna Barnes, welcome back. Our associate
you.
producer, one of our fearless leaders, was together with Carla Satinsky, our producer. You do such a great job on this
Thank
show. And you're a great speaker and great guest as well.
Wow,
So
too much praise.
it's
he owe you money?
it's all welcome, and it's all for the right reason.
Right.
But what's going on with
Well,
it? So what are you
today
doing?
I'm here as president of the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County to talk about a program that the Maryland League is putting on the rising sea levels. This is something that 2 years ago the State League decided was really important because obviously Maryland is here with the Chesapeake Bay, the Atlantic Ocean, the sea level is rising. And what does that mean for our shoreline? What does it mean for the entire country? And so there's a program being put on this coming Saturday at the Y River Center
Right.
across the bridge.
Beautiful
and
place.
Beautiful. It is a beautiful place. But the league, the State League, and Chesapeake College are putting on a program from 10 to 3 on the rising seas. What it means, why is it happening, what can be done about it.
You know, you think it's not just Chesapeake Bay, but I mean, the Potomac River is a tidal river in Georgetown all the way up to Little Falls. That's just, I mean, that's right here. Our banks as we go up. On
Right.
our
Well, I think the
border.
people, I mean, we can see it today.
well.
I mean, I think anybody that looks in the Chesapeake Bay at the islands, Smith Island, Tillman Island, all these islands that are getting smaller and smaller when you look at them historically.
There's a phone number, I believe, for the
Yes,
league.
that's a state league office number, and you can call that if you want to get more information about exactly where it is and register to go to that.
Very important issue. I hope
We all
everybody
know
does.
this is a myth, right?
I was going to say,
Don't-
that's it.
Isn't
Well,
that
if
the-
you
isn't that
have
the issue?
bayfront
You
property, you want
always-
to have oceanfront properties, might be good news.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I deal with that every day. I mean, people will call me, we'll write an article, and they'll tell us this is just a myth. There's nothing
Well,
going
I
on.
think this is a big controversy that's going on right now. Whether
Shouldn't
with,
be, it's
with-
science.
with journalism about the doubting. Do you put the doubters at the same level as
Well,
the
look what we did with
science?
Brian Williams.
Right, but but there are people
Sure.
that say that this is no science to this. I think if you
There
look.
is.
If you look at the new flood insurance regulations,
Right.
that's in part because of the rising levels. There are a lot of things that are happening.
Well, it's not even just about the sea level rise. It's about agriculture. It's about using the fishing in the bay and the consequences on heating the bay and why it's rising. So it has a big consequence. And Chesapeake Bay is actually a national resource. It's not even a state resource. And it cuts across 2 different states, which have to come together to deal with those issues. 3.
It's more than that.
Three.
The Chesapeake Bay greater drainage area covers, I believe, 6 or 7 states.
So is
Right.
Virginia involved in this?
Well, not in this particular conference. This is just to inform people in this general area. I mean, certainly people from Virginia are welcome, but this is going to be examining, in general, what the science is behind
So
it.
let's talk about this. What the outcome? The league is fantastic about looking at issues from all sides and then coming up and helping to educate voters, helping to educate the public about an issue. What do you see as an outcome?
Well,
coming
I
out
think
of this?
this is really, this is a first step. This is an education step. I mean, what is the problem? Why is it happening? And then I think it's going to be a process, as the league loves to do, of bringing people together, having them talk, having breakout sessions, and seeing what ideas people come up with. Who knows what the end result will be? Obviously,
Have
this
there
is
been
a
any
national.
proposals?
No, I don't know anything that's specifically out there. I think it's a national issue, obviously. It's an international issue.
Sure.
I mean, what are we going to do? I mean, it has to do with climate change, the decreasing volume of the ice, which is
Sure.
which is starting to melt. So these are all issues, and I think I think if nothing else, insurance companies are getting increasingly concerned because of the rising
Property.
levels and the property damage that causes.
A
when
lot of
there's
the beach
surges.
communities will not insure first floors.
Right.
You can buy I have a home at the shore, and they now have collapsible walls that your house has. You either have to be up on pilings,
Right.
or they have collapsible walls so that if the storm surge comes,
keep going through.
the
It'll
walls,
just- the Right. walls
the
go
walls,
and it goes
the
through.
walls recess
And the
so
water-
the water can flow underneath the house.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
it
fantastic.
doesn't. Right.
So, huge issue, but the league has never been shy in dealing with some of the key issues of our time.
Well, we'll see. And in June there'll be another state league convention, and we'll see where the league decides to go. Having had this.
Do you anticipate
this study.
legislation?
Perhaps that might be the next. I don't think it's not going to come out of this. I mean, this is a group of people really seeking information, but we'll see what happens this summer.
And I guess
where it
we'll
goes.
see what happens the next time you come and let us know what's going on. Thank you,
Exactly.
Linna. And
You're
thank
welcome.
all of you for joining me.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Thank all of you in the viewing audience for joining us for this week's edition of Montgomery Weekend Review. I'm Don Mooers, thanking you for joining us and looking forward to seeing you next time next week, I should say, at this very same time.